All right. So I guess it's recording now. So yeah, I'll state my premise and get it out of the way. So I think that the law of identity can exist on its own, mainly I guess because um it is a absolute law of logic, and I reject the notion that the other laws of logic, such as non-contradiction and excluded middle, are absolute laws of logic that must always have an effect on the law of identity, thus making it dependent on them. I don't think that's the case.
All right. What do you mean when you say it's an absolute law?
I mean, it like applies in every scenario. Like every scenario you could think of, the thing would be itself, thus being the law of identity.
Uh, you mind if I like send my syllogism and then I can like go into
Yeah, sure. You can like send it and like explain what it means if need be.
uh, let me see where I would actually I guess fill up. So I kind of think like your position is like a bit illogical because if we take away the law of excluded middle, right, and someone still tries to say the law of identity is true, we still have like its negation, and then that would be a problem because then something in its negation can't be true at the same time. Like, have you ever heard of like A equals A?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need law of excluded middle, or else A can equal its negation. Let's just say I said A equals negative, and that would make no sense. So I don't think you can like, deny the notion of the other laws if you need it to be able to assert the position you're going to say for your law that you're like being dependent on to even make sense.
All right. Just give me one. Okay, yeah. So, I disagree with that. I think that let's see. There are instances where that's definitely not the case. For instance, I think that things can be both true and false and can contradict each other while also remaining true. That can be said for things such as paradoxes, which can exist and can manifest. For instance, just as an example of paradoxes, because there are, I think, many. This sentence is a lie is both true and false because its negation doesn't negate the fact that it's true that it's a lie, which, although contradictory, still remains valid. So I think that paradoxes, by definition, which manifest and do manifest, are evidence that the law of non-contradiction and excluded middle don't necessarily have to absolutely apply. But even in those instances, the law of identity would not be dependent on those two because those paradoxes would still be themselves.
So like as a so give me one more example of a paradox. 'Cause I've never heard of the term paradox.
You never heard of paradoxes?
No.
Okay, yeah. So paradox, by definition, just is something that is both true and false. So there's that like example. Another example I can give you is kind of like less so. Maybe you can call it a paradox, but it's also a perspective shift. Hold on. So like a perspective shift, right? Such as if one person starts on one end of a street and walks to the opposite end, and another person walks on the opposite end of the street of the first person and comes in, right? Well, which end of the street is the beginning or the end, right? It can like to one person it's the ending, to the other person it's the beginning. That would be another example of something being both true and false, right? Because you would say, well, it can't be both the beginning and the end, but it could be. So there are like multiple paradoxes or shifts of perspective which can prove that those two laws of logic are not absolute, whereas the law of identity, my claim is that it is. So it's like not codependent.
All right. Before I go like into like your analogy, what do you consider the law of identity to be, real quick?
What do I consider it to be?
Yeah, if you were to phrase it to someone, what would you call it? Because so far,
The law of
absolute.
the law of identity simply states that something is itself. I think I also need to like really quickly. I need you didn't ask, but just to like clarify, the idea that the law of identity has any kind of entailment, such as if A equals A, it cannot equal B, is false. The law of identity does not like entail anything. It is just a statement of a fact. The entailment comes from the theory that the law of excluded middle and the law of non-contradiction would take that A equals A and entail it to mean otherwise. And my like claim is just like disregarding that as an absolute law of logic.
Okay. I'm sorry if I might make you repeat. Just tell me one more time why you think it's absolute. But I agree. I kind of see where you're coming from with your analogy of like one person being at the end or one person being at the beginning. But like, what do you consider to be absolute law?
Yeah, an absolute law is something that is infallible. It's always true. It will always be true that something is itself. That statement is factual, infallible.
All right, but like even you yourself, when you gave like the example of paradox, even you said it's like hypocritical, and like I think that would be illogical for us to try to put it by itself, though. Even if we take those statements and acknowledge that like it's hypocritical or illogical, then like why should it matter if it's absolute or not? If it's
Well, the
direct,
reason Well, the reason that it would be illogical, you would assume that it's illogical. In order for you to say it's illogical, you would need to assume that the laws of non-contradiction and the laws of excluded middle are valid. But like in this instance, by definition, I'm using paradoxes to dispute that they are like absolute laws of logic that must apply. Therefore, it wouldn't be illogical using those like that as a basis, is like what I'm saying. Because like those instances do manifest not just in concept, but in like real life. I think given the examples I used, that would be something we could say for certain. So it's not illogical if like those laws of logic are being disputed as being an absolute constant must follow, or else it's illogical.
like you repeat the last part you could.
Yeah, my bad. I'm saying that it would not be illogical if the evidence provided is used to dispute the fact that it would be an absolute law of logic, and because in those instances, it wouldn't be illogical if those laws of logic aren't actually like laws of logic or absolute in those areas, right? You would have to assume otherwise to say it's illogical.
Hmm. So like you'd be fine with statements of like so you'd be fine with statements like A equals negative A.
I'd be fine with statements if A equals negative A.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. So I'm not saying that the law of non-contradiction or the law of excluded middle never manifest. I'm trying to claim that as laws of logic, they're like not absolute, as in they're not, and that as that like not all instances will they be something that determines if something is logical. Obviously, if you have like if you have a red apple, um, and you say it's green, but it's clearly red, that would be a defeater for it being uh, green. But like, if there are paradoxes that manifest, you would be able to say that as paradoxes. In those instances, they would not be followed by the law of excluded middle or non-contradiction, but they would be following under the law of identity, which is the entire premise of why it is not dependent on the others, because it is absolute, whereas they are not. And even where
Like
they fail, it's sorry, go
oh
ahead.
sorry, you could continue. I didn't
No,
mean
I
to
was just
interrupt.
yeah, I was just gonna say where they fail, it is infallible.
Yeah, but I literally have examples where like your law doesn't make sense though.
What do you mean you have examples?
Well, not but like so you were saying yourself like you're saying how where mine wouldn't apply, right? Yours would still follow, right?
Yeah,
But I but while I have like syllogisms, sorry, I probably butchered that like directly make like your law not make sense at all though.
what
Whereas
kind of
mine
syllogisms are these?
that's just specific to yours. I think that makes it absolute.
what kind of syllogisms do you think defeat these like laws not being absolute?
I don't think the syllogisms. Well, of course, like the one I get given, like in no way will A ever equal negative A. But like you're saying, yours apply even where mine don't. But I don't think that makes it absolute. When I have like when I've given syllogisms where you agree that A can't equal negative A, to where
If
based
it
on
was,
like
sorry, I'm only cutting you off because I don't necessarily agree. If A doesn't equal negative A through the manifestation of a paradox, then we would be able to say that is the case, that it doesn't equal negative A. But that paradox itself is A, and it equals itself, which is A, I guess you could say. Like, that's really weird to word, but if like the paradox itself is that the apple is both red and green, or it is both the beginning and the end, that paradox would still fall under being itself. The only thing it wouldn't fall under is being true or false, because by definition it goes against that. So like my thing is, how could something that is infallible and constant be dependent on something that is entirely fallible and not constant? Because it's like it can, like, depending on the variables, it can be either something like a defeater, or it can be something that isn't like defeating anything.
you say, it could be a defeat or something that isn't defeating anything.
Yeah, like it's because it's not constant. I'm saying like the law of excluded Miller, non-contradiction, could defeat some things, but there are other things that manifest where it cannot defeat.
And you think your law can always defeat anything, or like?
I'm not claiming that it's like a defeater for anything. I'm just saying that all things are themselves. Sorry, I think I cut off. I'm not saying it doesn't that it defeats anything. I'm just saying that all things are themselves. Because, like, again, the law of identity has no entailment like itself. It is just a statement of a fact. It is not. The only entailment would come from the hypothetical instances of the law of excluded middle or non-contradiction, saying that A cannot equal not A, except for the instances where it does, of course.
All right, hold on. Let me look at your definition. Well, let me look at the definition of law of identity.
Okay.
Come on, nigga. Debate.
Oh, we already are. He's just looking up something.
They are.
Okay, fuck. Maybe I was wrong. Let's leave.
All right, so okay, so all right, so essentially you reject the negation of being true.
Pardon?
So like, do you like reject the negation of being true?
The negation of being true? What do you can you like put that in other words so like I don't have a brain fart of that?
All right, so basically, if you look at the syllogism I sent, so we have all things identified with itself as a proposition, right? Law of identity. And then we have a proposition or its negation must be true. So if you assert P1, then that means, so you're like, if it means you're like you're rejecting like the fact of like something must be true.
Yeah, I'm just hold on.
I can get what you're arguing for, like the paradox is like for if I you would if I were to say like A equals negative A, if you say something like your states as a fact, what was the fact again? Even with that statement.
Okay, so what I'm doing, I guess just to clarify, is that I'm rejecting the notion that the ability to like contradict something makes it false, or the ability, or that things have to be true or false. And I'm using the manifestation both in theory and concept, and real examples that can happen in real life to reject the syllogism that you're trying to create, is essentially what I'm trying to get at. and hopefully we're on the same page with that. Because like I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to establish that things can be true or false, and that things need to either be true or they need to have a negation, and there's like no in between, or like two cannot be at the same time. But I think what's happening, or like the struggle, is that you're only saying that, and I don't know that you're giving any kind of reason that my rejection of that and my reasoning for rejecting it is false. So like,
Well,
just
I did get the fact that like even you yourself say it was hypocritical, like it's illogical. So I'm
no, I
trying to
said
think
that
of
I don't think I said it was illogical. I said that in order to deem it illogical, you would need to assume that those laws of logic are infallible and constant, in which they aren't. So in those situations where things are both true and false, such as paradoxes or perspective shifts, you could not say it's illogical because it is a defeater for the very logic that you need to follow to say it is so.
but like I all right, so I can okay. So like I'm trying to think of how to approach you because like you have a pretty good argument. I'm trying to think of how to disprove it. So like so the reason I think yours follows is because like you gave paradoxes. Someone's like on one end of the road, someone else is like on the other. Someone could think like so they can be at both the beginning of the road and the end of the road at the same time.
Yeah, there can be that. There can also be things like this sentence is a lie, with both, which both is true and negates itself. It's both true and false. When you analyze the sentence, there's like manifestations of paradoxes, like by definition, that I'm using to like defeat that like line of reasoning that you're using. It's like that's my argument. I'm saying that again, how can something that is infallible and constant ever be dependent on something that is fallible and affected by variables?
Uh, God, I can see.
All right, good debate.
This is so fucking boring. Nah, bro.
How do we do we just
Alright,
do we just
bye.
have to leave for like the recording bot?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You have
You
to
still have
press
to leave.
like something blinks.
Stop. I'll just do it.